Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 20 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today by recently renewed third-year AWS community builder, John, as always. Good all. How are you doing today, John?
Well, that's different, isn't it? That's different. You didn't have to think that one up.
The content was there for me this week. I just had to take it. Although yours was probably the most low-key, I've renewed my AWS Community Builder status announcement that I saw last week. I was genuinely getting RSI last week, trying to like and comment on all of the AWS Community Builder renewal announcements. It was just too much, really. Maybe I should have created some sort of bot.
It's a bit
It's always
much.
fun.
It's a bit much.
It's always fun seeing the explosion of those when the renewals come out.
Yeah, there was nothing else in my LinkedIn feed for about 3. In fact, still to this day, I think. So yeah,
I'm happy. I'm excited. I'm humbled. You're none of those things. Let's be honest. You had about that much of cool, and then you moved on with your day.
No, I was all of those things, John, and more. Yeah,
for about that long.
No, I'm still reeling from it now. It's I'm looking forward.
I still haven't recovered from the joy yet.
3 years later.
Yeah.
I need another one of these, and I need to find somewhere to put them. I never got my number 1, but I've got my number 2, and I'm looking forward to getting my number 3. So yeah.
Well, the 3 should come with the renewal swag kit. You needed to talk to Jason in Vegas to get the 1. I did that.
Yeah, I found that out too late, so I'm going to have to go to Vegas again just for that very reason. Yeah. Anyway, we're also very fortunate to be joined again today by AWS Community Builder, also recently renewed, and AWS Ambassador and AWS Gold Jacket owner, Jen Bergstrom. How are you doing today, Jen?
I am fantastic. And yeah, you guys have 3 years in the Community Builders. I hit my 6th year this year, so that's pretty exciting. Yeah. And tried to wear the golden jacket, but did not play nice with the camera. So sorry about that.
Yeah, we did have some technical glitches in the backstage prior to coming on recording, and we did speculate whether the golden jacket was creating some kind of electrostatic interference. But we've seen your gold jacket, Jen, so we know that you are a genuine gold jacket owner. But it's great to see you rocking your Ambo shirt as well, your ambassador shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to show that one off a little bit. It's fun being
I thought
all
you just come from a darts game.
It does look a bit like darts, actually, doesn't it? Yeah. It has your name on, right?
That fancy blaze. This one? Yeah, it does right around the arm.
Nice. Yeah.
You can't steal somebody else's ambassador shirt and actually wear it and claim it as yours because there is no plausible deniability on it.
Was that a problem prior to with the previous ambassador shirts?
Well, that's a very good question. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe that's like why they've gone down that route. Yeah.
That's like the new thing, though, for like any swag that you get from AWS now. They like to personalize it. They've been doing it with the golden jackets for a while with the ambassadors, but the community builders are doing it with their golden jackets now too. So
nice.
Personalization.
Well, my one of my life goals will have been achieved when I get my name on a pair of socks, I think.
You can actually make your own socks.
Yeah, but they always want ridiculous minimum order quantities from what I've seen. So I only need 1 pair of socks with my name on, or maybe 7, 1 for each day of the week, but not like 1,000 pairs of socks with my name on, because I don't think anyone else is actually going to wear socks with my name on. So
fair enough. You can actually get them on Amazon, customizable.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, send me the link afterwards, and
I can do
make that dream come true as well. So
there you go. We're all about making dreams come true. It's a good thing.
So, Jen, we've kind of introduced your community credentials, but tell us a little bit more about what you do for a living and how you've managed to achieve all those credentials.
Yeah, so I'll start with the last question because that one's really quick and easy. I'm insatiably curious, and I also have ADHD, and the combination of the two means that I'm constantly looking to learn new things, and I have to have something to keep me focused. So the credential target keeps me focused while I'm learning all the new stuff. So, that's that one. As far as what I do, I'm the VP of Cloud and Data Solutions at my company, Parsons, which is an international company, about 20,000 people globally, split into 2 halves. Critical infrastructure, construction, gigacity projects is 1 half. And then I sit on the federal side where we do contracts with federal, state, local governments, both on the civilian and military side. So it's pretty fun. I drive the cloud strategy for the federal half of the company. So basically anything and everything cloud. If anybody has a question, they reach out to me.
And you did mention, I never knew this about you before, Jen, but you are one of these multi-cloud people. I think do you have similar statuses with other vendors, or?
Not as advanced. I am certified in AWS, Azure, Oracle, and GCP clouds. I have 3 certifications in the other 3, and then all 12, of course, for AWS.
Wow. Okay. Well, I also have ADHD, so you need to let me in on your secret of how you get so focused on these things. I've got so far, but I'm still getting very distracted. So
I think it's proper misapplication of hyperfocus.
Okay. I'll have to Google that if I remember it and get the time. Anyway, thank you for sharing that with us, Jen. That's great. But we are not here to talk about all of our respective AWS credentials, even though obviously we like to flex those at every opportunity. But we are here to talk about AWS news. So as regular listeners to the podcast will know, once a week I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. And then John picks a selection of the articles that we share with our guest. And sometimes the guest comes back with an article they prefer to talk about, as Jen has done this week. So we're not completely prescriptive about the subject matter. We do like to be flexible and give our guests the opportunity to talk about something which interests them. So we do, of course, have such a selection of articles this week. 80% chosen by John, 20% chosen by Jen. I did the maths in my head there. Did you like that? So let's go into our first article for this week, which is a blog post from the AWS Cloud Operations blog. And the title is Announcing AWS CloudTrail Network Activity Events for VPC Endpoints. So, John, this was one of your 80%. What was it that piqued your interest about CloudTrail Network Activity Events for VPC Endpoints?
I mean, nothing. It's boring as hell. But
well, that's what I thought, but I wasn't going to say that. But...
I mean, like anything audit focus, it's really quite dull. It's one of those things that you need it if you know you need it, but otherwise I wouldn't worry about it. The first thing I thought though was I thought we spoke about this like 3 months ago. Was that just when it was in preview in a couple of it? Like, I thought we had this conversation already. Like, this is great and we like this because up until the 11th, you didn't have any kind of audit in the CloudTrail side of things on VPC endpoints being created and stuff moving over them and all that kind of thing. You still had flow logs to an extent because it sits in VPC, you have your flow logs and all that kind of thing hangs together, but you didn't have this, I've made it, I've got rid of it, I've changed the resource policies and all that kind of thing. But I thought we spoke about this 3 months ago.
I don't remember. Maybe we did. But yeah, sometimes it is here's a thing in preview and here it is now in GA. I'm always careful to root out the announcement that says, here's this great new service, which is now available in this region. It's not really a new service. It just happens to be in that region. So I generally try and keep those out of the news. Well, I guess it is news if you're in that region. But I don't know. I don't remember talking about it. What do you think on this one, Jen? Have you is this news to you or is it old news?
Well, it's news to me that they're announcing it as news now. I'm kind of with John on this. I thought this was something that they had talked about a few months ago. And, I don't know, maybe in this blog post, it's because they're actually showing how you can configure it and do the setup side of it versus the previous one was maybe just the announcement of it. So, reading between the tea leaves, maybe people were having trouble getting it set up and configured properly. And so they figured they should release a blog that tells people how to do it.
Yeah. So we announced the feature, nobody used it. Now we're announcing how to do it. Cool. Anything else to say on it, John? Or is that did you just want to say that you thought it was old news?
I mean, to an extent, yeah. This is one of those. Why has it taken so long for the previous, to go from then to now? And why did it take so long? Because VPC has been around for what, a decade now, I think. CloudTrail has been around for at least that long as well. Is one of these, okay, endpoints are newer than that, fine, fair enough. But I would have thought it was fairly important that you had proper auditability on your entire cloud estate. Like, why is CloudTrail integration not a day one thing? Because as far as I can work out, the only day one requirements for an AWS service, a new service, is you can see it in the console. I think that's it. I think that's it. It might have to have a CLI as well, but I think that's about the size of it. So it doesn't have to have IAC. Fine, we've kind of learned to accept that as a community to an extent, much as it infuriates me, but we've kind of learned to accept it. And it's been the source of a number of comedy songs, I think, which is one of your favourite things, Carl. But it doesn't seem
We still
to
haven't done one, actually.
No,
Yeah, I've had so many ideas for parody songs, but none of them have ever seen the light of day yet. So,
we need those to start seeing the light of day.
No, they will remain buried. I'm not getting involved in that. But it doesn't seem that CloudTrail integration is a day one thing, apparently, and I don't get why that is, because it really should be.
Well, especially for something like VPC endpoint creation, because you can do a lot with VPC endpoints, and if you can't manage and monitor that with discipline at the organizational level, which you couldn't if you can't see it in the logs, then that feels like that's a big problem.
I suppose it raises the question: what other services are not currently auditable via CloudTrail? Yeah. Anybody know the answer? I don't know the answer, but
feel free to write in
offline,
PO box. I'll show my age there.
info@logicast.com. There we go. That is a real email address. Yeah, somebody actually emailed it today as well. I got quite excited. I've only ever emailed it to test it to make sure that it still works, but a real person emailed it today. So yeah. Anyway, on that note, let's move along to Jen's 20% of the selection. This was the article that Jen wanted to talk about. This is an article on the AWS DevOps and Developer Productivity blog about how to enhance your application resiliency using Amazon Q Developer. So I'm not going to ask John what he thinks about this because we already know what John thinks about Q Developer. I'm hoping Jen has a more positive view of Q Developer and how you can use it to enhance your application resiliency. So what was it that piqued your interest, Jen, about this particular topic?
Well, so one of the things we didn't talk about in my introduction is that I'm a chaos engineer practitioner. And basically that means, deliberately injecting failure into your operational systems to make sure that they're resilient. So anytime I see an article that's talking about enhancing application resiliency, it catches my interest. This one in particular is interesting, though, because one of the challenges that I've seen with designing architectures for AWS or any cloud is building that resiliency. And it's always those unexpected single points of failure that your newer engineers don't think about that really bite you. And this integration with Q for developers, where it can actually tell you where those single points of failure are, provide recommendations on how to improve the architecture. It feels to me like this, if it's implemented as well as they're implying it is in the article, will really help bridge that gap from a more junior architect that doesn't necessarily see those slightly more hidden single points of failure into a more senior architect level. So I'm pretty excited about the capability that it can provide for upskilling the more junior architects and helping them see the problems.
So how would that actually work then? Would it be a case of asking questions about where the problems lie?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look through the article, it talks about, it actually provides some nice sample prompts for how to ask Q to assess your architecture. And then, the recommendations that it provides are pretty nice. One of the things I appreciate about Q that they built into it kind of from the outset, which is something they did very right, is it teaches. It doesn't just tell you, here's what you should do. It says, here's what you should do and why, right? And to me, that's the big second step that it has to do. So we've already got Q integrated into some of our dev tooling. This just is a matter of, getting our engineers to ask the question when they're using it for their architecture. So that's a pretty light lift because they're already using Q.
Yeah, I guess this kind of dovetails in with a lot of the AI infusion we're seeing in the well-architected framework. I understand that there's going to be a lot more AI driven now in the well-architected review process. So I guess it's kind of similar types of questions you're going to be asking here, particularly around the resilience pillar of the framework.
Yeah. One
John?
thing I did think was interesting. Sorry, I'll pipe up one more thing in here.
Yeah, no worries.
They talk about the failure mode evaluation and failure mode and effects analysis, which is a great thing to do. They don't mention FIS, fault injection simulator or service at all in the article, which frankly kind of surprised me. Now, fault injection simulator is fairly limited still in the services that it directly supports. and that may be why they weren't calling it out here. But I would have expected them to at least give it a shout out if they're talking about evaluating the resiliency of your system.
Yeah. Is that something you're using on a regular basis as a chaos engineer?
It is. It's so actually I've been delving a lot into chaos engineering for AI systems recently, and same limitation exists with Fizz. It doesn't have the capabilities built in to integrate in with Bedrock or SageMaker or any of those tools yet. I'm waiting for the day when it does, because that'll make my life a lot easier. Right now I'm using Lambda functions and step functions to orchestrate, and doing a lot of hand weaving the tooling together to create our experiments. But yeah, we use Fizz for our more traditional deployments currently, and it is helpful. It's kind of an easy button for injecting chaos into your system.
John, anything to add on this?
I don't need Fizz. I'm just a bad developer.
You inject your own faults into it?
Yeah, when Jen said about being a chaos engineer and deliberately injecting faults into systems, I think, well, I know lots of chaos engineers. It's just that deliberateness that is often missing. Lots of people injecting faults into systems all the time, but yeah.
Yeah, chaos engineering is actual, it's based on the scientific principle. So you actually put discipline into the process. Kind of misnamed. It's not chaotic. It's
organized chaos.
Organized chaos. Yeah.
Much like your desk, Carl.
Much like my life, in fact. Yeah.
No, I don't have anything else on this. I've been out-talked, which is rare. I'm out-certified on the pod, which is rare, and I'm out-talked as well, which is rare. So no, nothing else. But to be clear, I don't hate Q Developer. I get quite animated because I like calling it Clippy because it reminds me of Clippy. And someone else has gone and made a Clippy web app or something that you can download that hooks into various LLMs now, which is really funny. But no, I mean, I like this generally. And the point around using LLMs and chatbots and all the rest of it to bring more junior folks up is something that we've spoken about quite a lot. I think there's a risk because, yes, Q is quite good at teaching, but the others are not so good. And they say, just do it like this. And this is where you get vibe coding. It's like, oh, it just, here's a thing. It just works. Cool. How? Why? How did you get there? And have you been through, I know that in tech we're very kind of guilty of using military terms and that kind of thing. And it's not necessarily correct, but have you been through the trenches? Have you been through this kind of the meat grinder, as it were, of you've done it wrong, and it's woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning? So I'm all for accelerating people's learning and all the rest of it, but equally, there's no better teacher than being woken up by something that you built at 4 a.m. because every once in a while, Redis cache eviction comes up in an exam, and that is burned into my brain now.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yep. There we go. Well, they're probably, the vibe code is going to be creating things that are going to wake other people up, I would imagine, not them.
Yeah, me.
Yeah, SREs all over the world.
Yeah, it'll maybe wake the vibe coder up, but then they'll just point at the SRE that actually knows what they're doing, but that's it.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, on that note, let's move along to our third article for this week. And this is an article on the AWS security blog, all about mapping AWS security services to Mitre frameworks for threat detection and mitigation. So, John, I know you had some thoughts around this one.
I don't have thoughts about this particularly. It was more of a convenient in, but let's do a little bit of an intro for the uninitiated. So Mitre is one of the, what do they call themselves? The CVE something authority, name authority of last resort, or something really quite apocalyptic. They're one of sort of three organizations that sit above the CVE, which is critical vulnerability something. I forget all the tier lists. There's too many of them. That sort of sits there and classifies, here's the vulnerability, here's how bad it is, here's what it is, here's the score, here's any remediations, or if there are any, here's have we seen it in the wild, and all that kind of jazz. And they sit kind of at a fairly high level. And then there's others that sit underneath them. A number of services within AWS map to this CVE framework already. So if you look at Inspector, that will say, oh, you've hit this CVE or that CVE or whatever. And it's worth understanding this, and it's worth understanding that there's both attack and defend, which, like most security things, are made up of really stupid acronyms, because it's not attack, it's ATT and CK. It's like, okay, because you just have to be special, don't you? But they say they align things to these frameworks, and they talk about the shared responsibility model in this article, and yada, 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 yada. And honestly, I get bored because it's very long and very boring. What's more interesting is reasonably recently, we saw Mitre, one of the firms of last resort, as it were, had a bit of a wobble with their funding because they're a government-funded organization, and I believe it's some sort of contract expire or something like that. I didn't dig into it in enormous detail, and they got a letter basically saying that we're not going to renew, or that they hadn't been renewed as early as they are used to being renewed. And then the security community kind of went a bit about everything, because it's what we're going to do without the CVE database, and who's going to pick up this funding, and then it was all kind of much ado about nothing, because the government then did renew for another 11 months or something. But off the back of that, and maybe they're working on it beforehand, I don't know, it just feels very reactionary. The EU have gone and created their own vulnerability database, and have clearly not shopped the name, because it's EUVD, and if you're of a certain age, that's something quite dirty. So they've not shopped that name at all. But I just thought that was quite interesting, that okay, AWS is still going to map to these frameworks that exist. CVE is still going on, still being supported, and all the rest of it. But then there was this, it's government funded, but it's private, and various governments go through cost-cutting exercises every so often, is kind of right and proper, because I don't like my tax money being wasted. I don't think anybody does. But then that's not the sort of thing. No, you can have the money. You can just keep having the money because you're needed. And then the EU kind of went, American thing. Let's have our own one. Is sort of what it feels like to me.
Well, and as the UK, we'll need our own one as well, because we're not part of the EU or America. So, yeah.
That is true.
Anything to add on this, Jen?
I always kind of laugh at the acronyms. I was laughing at DEFEND because it's D3 FEND, which reminds me of the movie Megan, which was M3 GAN. It's about an AI robot. Actually really enjoy that movie. If you want an entertaining view into what generalized artificial intelligence looks like, that movie's a fun one. But, so I was laughing at the acronym too, with the defend side rather than the attack side. The interesting thing for me with this one in particular is it is that public-private partnership between, the commercial entity or the nonprofit entity, and then the governments that are funding it and providing that to keep it going. But on the US side of the house, a lot of our accreditation process that goes into play for any services or applications that are used by the federal government, they have to be compliant, and they have to show how they're dealing with and resolving the CVEs. And a lot of those compliance frameworks are built around Mitre and around what they've done with attack and defend. So if this were to get unfunded and go away, I was just thinking about what the chaos that would inject potentially into that accreditation process, especially when you pair it with, on the US side of the house, there's a lot of emphasis right now on bringing in commercial off-the-shelf products into the federal space. So you're throwing chaos into how they get accredited to operate, and then you're bringing more of them in. And that just feels like it's a domain that's ripe for adversarial behavior that we don't want to see happening. So I was glad to see that they got the funding through to March next year, locked away at least. So we have another year to kind of figure out exactly what the contingency plan needs to be. But it'll definitely something that I appreciate, John, you bringing to my notice as well, because I hadn't been tracking it, and it could have big impacts for us. So,
yeah, I mean, I'd only kind of lightly seen it because I was sort of scanning security news, and I'm on like a billion different newsletters, and it broke through the filter. I'm like, oh, that's not good. And then someone that we work with found the EU one, and we just all had a good giggle about that name as well.
Yeah, that name is unfortunate.
But given that it does still exist and will do so for another year, do we want to have a quick chat about which services map to which aspects of it? There is a little table in the blog post a little bit further down. The one with the life cycle stage, threat modeling, risk assessment, etc.
Yeah, I mean they're vaguely interesting, I guess. I mean, none of these things are sort of groundbreaking. On the attack side of things, it talks about detection and mapping, and that's Security Lake, Inspector, Macy, Security Hub, like you'd expect, Guard Duty, CloudTrail, and then it talks about step functions and Lambda, weirdly as well, but it's more about response and containment. So this is one of those. AWS is making you do the work, I think, because if you look at guard duty malware, whatever it is, that's a brilliant example. It says, "Oh, I found something on this thing. You should go and deal with that," and that's all it'll do. It'll just sort of tag it and say, "Oh, that looks a bit sus. Go deal with it," and then you have to build your whole entire workflow yourself, which we could talk about ad nauseum, because a couple of weeks ago now we spoke about AWS had told you how to build exactly that. So, well, you know how to do it. I've been to actual tech talks on how to do it. Why haven't you just done it? But, okay. And then on the defend side of things, it's talking about, again, auto remediation blocking, so WAF, MFA. And then it talks about fake IAM users and that kind of jazz on the engage side of things. But like, none of this is, until you get into the engage side, which is a bit more, you have a problem that you need to deal with. You're talking about doing honeypots and that kind of jazz. It's all, you should be doing this anyway, right? You should be using guard duty. And I get pinged by our customers every once in a while saying, "Why are you doing that? You haven't done that before." No, I'm doing a project for you. Like that's why you haven't seen that before, is I haven't done that before and now I am. So thanks, guard duty. But this is all just kind of stuff that you should be doing anyway. And the fact that it does map into the Mitre framework, fine, wonderful. I don't think it really impacts your day-to-day, though, because yes, you should have WAF on, you should be using guard duty, and you should be using CloudTrail, and you should be alerting on things when they come out. You shouldn't just be, "Oh, CloudTrail's on." Yeah, but you're doing anything with that data. You should be actually looking at these things. But yeah, it's interesting. It's nice to see that it's been thought of, as opposed to here's a big sort of scattergun approach of security services, meh, and it sort of sticks. It's been vaguely thought through, which is quite nice.
Yeah, and actually looking at it from the business perspective, I appreciate this table and I appreciate the contents of this blog, partially because a lot of the security folks that I talk with at my company and with our partner companies aren't necessarily super conversant in AWS and the different services they offer. So being able to map them and frame them in the Mitre framework is a good way to help drive up their understanding of, well, here's why we're spending money on guard duty, and here's why we're using Security Hub, and here's why we have these things defined, and why we're monitoring for these types of errors in CloudTrail. They don't necessarily understand that by default, and this kind of allows me to make that mapping and speak their language and translate it effectively for them. So from that perspective, it's really nice that they laid it out like this. I agree with you, though. Nothing that they listed out in here is, game changing as far as what the AWS capabilities that they've provided. It's not a big announcement like, "Hey, here's all the new cool stuff that we're doing for you." But I like the ease of layout that they provide with it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned money there, and that's where my mind was going with this as well. It's kind of a justification, really, of you can just imagine somebody somewhere in a finance department looking at the bill and thinking, security leak, that's expensive. Well, why do we need that? And this is, I guess, one way to help justify that and say, well, if we don't have that, then we've got a big gap here, and we need to plug that gap with something else.
Well, that's one of the easier ones to explain. It's about security, Mr. Finance. But if you see a big bill for something that's less well named, like, what are you spending all this money on Athena for? Isn't that a god or something? I'm doing security queries.
Yeah. Is Athena in there? I don't think.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is in there. Where is it? Oh, yes, it is. Yes. Post-incident and intelligence in the attack.
That's primarily what I use it for, but maybe not for security. Like, well, on earth, all this traffic coming. Oh, it's that.
Yeah. Log
Well, that
query.
oftentimes ties back to security, because you're getting a burst of traffic sometimes when you're getting an attack on your system. So.
Well, there we go. Interesting article to help you justify your security bill, I guess, is where we've arrived on that one. So on that note, let's move along to our fourth article for this week. This is an article all about how AWS is pushing UK chip plans amid the AI energy crunch. So as we know, AWS have been promoting their own silicon for a number of years. I think we're on the fourth generation of Graviton now, and there's a whole bunch of specialist Trainium chips, etc., for running AI workloads. And this article is all about how justifying the economic rationale for pushing ahead with this custom silicon, given that certain areas, as we've spoken about on the podcast before, seem to be slowing down, like the building of new data centers and so on and so forth. So, John, thoughts on this?
I don't know why AWS have to defend moving more into ARM chips, if I'm really honest. I thought they use less power. That's why your phone uses it. Was well established at this point. Like that was, they were built for mobile, cool. And then we discovered that you could pack significantly more computing power into a smaller space. So then they ended up in mobile, and then they ended up in graphics cards. And then Apple had the bright idea of, why don't we just run an entire laptop on this? Poof, there you go. And now everybody uses an ARM chip almost all the time, I think. I mean, I do at work. I mean, I don't at home because I have a gaming PC that I built, and you can't really buy consumer ARM chips that aren't soldered to stuff yet. But as soon as you can, I probably will. But yeah, I don't know why they have to have this conversation in the first place. I will apologise to anyone that goes and reads this article, because the amount of adverts on this are just obscene. But you can thank City AM for that, because it's a London ad-driven newspaper, so you can thank City AM for that. But I don't know why this is a conversation that has to be had. Okay, it came up at the London Summit, and this is probably something that was, Dave Brown that got up on stage at the summit was probably interviewed by about 1,000 different newspapers after the summit, and that's what spawned this article, because we can talk about something that's prescient. We're a little newspaper. Wonderful. ARM generally, I like ARM generally. Graviton specifically, I like because it's the price to performance, and almost all of the time now it's basically drop-in. So if you're using a managed service, just stop using x86, right? If you're using RDS, if you're using Elasticache, if you're using any of these things where they look after it for you, just stop doing that and use ARM. Just do it, because it'll save you probably 10% on the bill, probably something in that kind of order. And it's not terribly hard to get your code base to work on ARM these days either. If you have to go and recompile it yourself, it's not terribly hard to do that. When Mac first released the M1 chips, that was quite painful, because things like Docker didn't run on it. It's like, well, how am I supposed to do any work on this? This is useless. But within 6 months, it was all kind of fine. Now we're on the 4th gen of those, and we're on the 4th gen of Graviton chips. And the other upshot with ARM is there's a whole bunch of workload specific architectures that have been put out, things like Trainium, which is just, I just think about trains rather than AI, if I'm honest. I just think, what are you doing? Is that for trains? Like, no, it's not. It's for training things. And Inferentia, so that's for inference. And just because of the nature of ARM, you can be much more specific about, this is for this workload, rather than the x86 rationale way of doing things, mode of operation of, well, here's a generic CPU, just throw power at it and it'll work. And we've seen this specifically with the consumer side of things as well, is most ARM chips are not a general purpose CPU. They're actually a whole bunch of very specific purpose CPUs mushed together. But generally, I like ARM. I don't understand this conversation. It's like, why do we need to defend ARM? Like, we're going to build more ARM chips because we're going to buy less non-ARM chips. Like, okay, fine.
Well, I think it's the answer to the question of how sustainable is data center growth to power AI data centers, really. And obviously that bleeds into our final article, which we haven't talked about yet, but it's the pressure on national power infrastructure. Do we actually know what happened in Spain a couple of weeks ago yet? They were very quick to say it wasn't a cyber attack, but I never did follow the news to find out what it was. But as we know, Spain lost power for almost a day. All of their trains stopped running, all of their internet, telecoms, everything just stopped running for a day. I guess there's a lot of people who are concerned that the rise of the AI data center could cause those sorts of issues in other locations too. And when you look at obviously there's a lot of responsible uses for AI, but there's an awful lot of compute power being used to generate people's action doll figures and whatever the latest craze is on social media. I mean, I dread to think how much power that consumed, and who's paying for that, and where does it actually come from? Whilst ARM chips may be much more efficient than other CPU architectures, they still use a lot more power than no chips. And there's an awful lot of them being built and put into data centers. But what are your thoughts on this one, Jen?
Well, I think what you just said is exactly why this article had to come out, because AI, with the boom of it and with how quickly it was released and made available for the general populace to use, and with how quickly the general population has been adopting that use, whether it's with the free LLMs online, whether it's with Gemini in your Google phone, whether it's with, AI is being incorporated everywhere very, very quickly. And I think they're quickly coming up against that reality of, people that do care about the environment and care about trying to be sustainable in the way that we operate, well-architected pillar, people are asking those questions. Well, how is this sustainable? How are we going to do this? How are we going to manage this? And the ARM chips, Trainium, there's a line in here that says that Trainium 3 is up to 40% more energy efficient than Trainium 2. So it's almost like an inverse Moore's law in the way that they're doing the efficiency, where it's getting rapidly more and more efficient. And that makes it somewhat sustainable, or somewhat more sustainable than it would be if we were using classic GPU chips for everything and just blowing up the power consumption. We're still going way over on the power consumption, and part of me wonders from the AWS side, how is this impacting their desire to be carbon neutral by, what year did they say they were going to do that? 2035, I think initially was what they said. Is this having an impact on that? How is it impacting if it is? And I think maybe the next article we talk about will address that a little bit with what they're hoping for. But, I think that's why this is coming up in the conversation, because it's so easily accessible now and people are using it for everything. It's very quickly becoming a companion in our lives. And, if all of a sudden that went away because the power consumption of it wasn't sustainable, think of the impact that would have already on the way that we function in society.
Yeah, it's just kind of permeating into people's lives. It's not even like I'm adopting, consciously adopting these services now. Every time you make a Google search, you get an AI generated result.
You can turn that off. You can turn
Can
that
you?
off.
Okay, but it's on by default.
It's
so,
not a setting you
yeah.
turn off. No, if you put a swear word at the end of your search, it doesn't do it.
Oh, okay. There we go. I did wonder why it appeared for some and not others, but yeah. But that's just an example. Obviously, Copilot is generally now built into. Obviously, these are not AWS services, but Copilot built into Windows, generally just kind of there by default. Click that. Ooh, what's this? Ooh, I'm your AI-powered assistant. And I see my wife using it to help her with essays that she's writing and things like that. So it's just, it's just kind of there, and it's just kind of happening, and it's just kind of permeating into people's lives. And there's, as we said, this the crazy trends like the action doll figures and whatever else the next kind of social media craze is going to be. Plus, of course, all the responsible uses of it, like the NatWest case study that was mentioned at the UK London Summit, where they're using a lot of large language models to help with their communications with customers and that kind of thing. So even if you're not consciously adopting AI, you are using it because, people that you're interacting with are using it. Amazon are using it to make recommendations to you. And, when Alexa pipes up and tells you need more dog poo bags, which is about the only thing she recommends for me. But whether you've consciously adopted it or not, everybody is using it. And, it's got to be powered somehow. So, but that is a nice segue into our final article for this week. This is an article on the BBC. Yes, we still have state-funded broadcasting and news in the UK. Very rarely do we feature articles from the BBC, but this is an article from the BBC. The headline is UK needs more nuclear to power AI, says Amazon boss. So this is an interview with Matt Garman. I would imagine off the back of the recent London summit, they got a chance to sit down with Matt. And Matt is basically telling UK Gov, more nuclear power stations, please, to power our data centers. We're going to spend a lot of money on data centers in the country, but we need you to provide us with the power. So I know we've spoken about nuclear a couple of times on the podcast before. It can be controversial, but potentially it is the answer to this because it is incredibly efficient. So, John, thoughts on this?
Well, it's not potentially, it is the answer. There's no potential about it. So here's the rub. I'm generally a fan of nuclear power, right? And it's one of the biggest fails of marketing. I think it was Rory Southern that said this. It's got the same name as the big blowy up thing. You could have called it something else and people wouldn't have had that connotation. Okay, I get it. It refers to the nucleus of the atom and all that jazz, because I did physics. I kind of know how it works. But, that's a big fail of marketing right there. You could have called it something else. But okay. I'm a big fan of nuclear energy in general because of a number of reasons. I mean, partly I was probably brainwashed into it as a child because I went to a decommissioned nuclear power station up north in the UK and just went, oh, this is all amazing, because it's great fun. Why is it generally the solve for this right now? So I like renewables generally. I have solar panels in my roof. I'm quite open about that. I have on my roof. They wouldn't do any good in the roof. They're on the roof. I have the battery storage, which, okay, lithium, not great, but I'm going to get lots of charge cycles out of it. probably for 4 months out of the year, I don't have an electricity bill because I'm not pulling anything in from the grid. I like renewables generally. The grid, certainly in the UK and as I understand it everywhere else, isn't built for renewables right now. Okay, what the grid does is it moves power, doesn't store it, it moves it, and that's because old-fashioned coal and gas and whatever the third oil, I don't know how much oil is burnt for power, but I assume some, puts out a consistent output. Okay, it's very consistent. It's on, and it's just putting the same amount of power out pretty much all of the time. Particularly coal, which is what 50 years ago most power was. It was mostly coal, right? It was on, and it was producing this much, and the grid moved it. And in terms of turning things on and turning things off, because you do that with gas a little bit, it's to regulate the frequency because it's a supply and demand thing. That's a much bigger problem with renewables because the sun is out when it's out. It's windy when it's windy. Okay, tides are nice and predictable, but they only happen 4 times a day, sort of in and out twice. They only happen 4 times a day. So whilst they're nice and predictable, they're not constant. And that's the same with basically every renewable, apart from maybe wave power, but that kind of goes up and down as well, depending on the weather and the wind and all the rest of it. We don't have proper storage in the grid. So that's problem the first. And how do you solve that? Well, massive infrastructure projects is how you solve that. And there's 2 solutions to that. Lots of storage, cool, and more consistent power output. And nuclear is a good option for that because it is zero carbon. Much as I think various green lobbyists don't like this, it's actually safer than things like coal. There's fewer deaths from nuclear, even if you take all the various nuclear disasters in all of history than coal power plants from the last couple of 100 years. You can take out the really early ones where health and safety didn't exist, and nuclear is still safer overall. It's not putting stuff out into the atmosphere that's going to choke you, which is great. It's generally safer to work in the environment as well because there's not stuff on fire, apart from when it's gone wrong, but that's happened like 4 times in history generally, and the big ones were because of underfunding of government, so that's a problem. But generally, it's the solution because until we solve the storage problem out in the grid, we need consistent power outputs, and more to the point, we need more of it. And if you look at the energy density of something like uranium or plutonium, it's 250,000 tons of coal is about the same as 4 grams of uranium. So it's cool. And even once you've used it, it's still 96% pure. So you can recycle it and use it again a bunch. But we don't do that because nuclear, scary.
The big question is, though, John, have you got a Mr. Fusion?
I want a Mr. Fusion.
Personal nuclear
especially
reactor.
if it's attached to a DeLorean that can fly.
Yeah, I mean, it's been available for 10 years now because, Dr. Emmett Brown brought it back from the future from 2015, and we're now in 2025. So, and I just had a quick look while you were talking there, and you can actually buy Mr. Fusion Krupp's coffee machine, which is a replica of the Mr. Fusion reactor. So I think you should get yourself a Mr. Fusion, John, given that you're such a fan of nuclear.
I mean, to be fair, my kind of pop culture version of that is much more from the Fallout video game series, and let's not go there.
Well, that's kind of I'm too old for that. Anyway, Jen, your thoughts on nuclear power? Have you got a Mr. Fusion?
I do not have a Mr. Fusion, although I've been really pondering getting a replica of the flux capacitor to put on display somewhere, just because that's too cool. My thoughts on this one, I'm with John. Nuclear is the way that we need to go as far as managing the energy consumption side of thing. I personally think that it's a longer term answer than a lot of the renewables, just because of the reliability of it, the consistency of it, and the availability of the fuel for it. Because, we always talk about uranium and plutonium and all that, but you can actually build smaller scale fission reactors that use the byproducts ones, of those. Yeah, exactly. They use the byproducts of those ones, and they use other less less reactive elements. So there's a lot of potential usability that you can extend that's safer than the traditional nuclear elements that we think of.
The one. Yes.
Yeah,
I like a thorium reactor, and that's because you can't make weapons out of it. That's why people like it.
Exactly. So it's less risky. The other thing I really liked about this article, and one of the things that I think is long overdue and way underplayed in the conversation when it comes to nuclear power, is the idea of the micro reactors. Right, the really, really small reactor that would literally be attached to the side of the data center, consistently produce enough energy for that data center, maybe a little bit of overflow, but not much more than that. And you're talking about a nuclear reactor that literally can fit in a room because it's small enough scale, but it fuels the whole data center. To me, I'm a little bit tongue in cheek here, but I'm half waiting for AWS to come out with nuclear reactor as a service. They'll have some name for it that's, who knows, but I'm half waiting for them to come out with that because they already have the mobile data centers that you can come out with. Well, what's the next step? You need power for that. Hey, let's add another trailer that's a little nuclear reactor, and you can get that as part of the service, right? There's very little downside to them if you can get past all of the scare language.
I think they've canned the snowmobile service now. The semi truck that you could drive up to your data center and hoover up all your data. So they've probably got a whole load of containers sitting around that could be repurposed as data center nuclear reactors. But I mean, what could be more sustainable than a data center that just powers itself for as long as it needs to? I mean, that's the ultimate in sustainability. Doesn't really need any more planning permission than the building itself, because as you said, it's the reactor is the size of a room in that building. Whereas, you look at all of your other renewable energy sources. I mean, wind farms, etc. Huge. Well, it depends on your point of view, I guess. But some people think they're a blight on the landscape. Yeah, what could be more sustainable than a data center that can power itself?
Well, then you tie that to Kuiper,
more
which
nuclear.
they're building out and launching more and more satellites, and there's your comms. So you don't even need it to be wired into anything, right? If you tie it all together.
No power, no fiber. Yeah, sticky data centers anywhere you can build a building. Exactly. Yeah, I guess. So yeah, cool. What's the nuclear situation like in the US? I'm not sure Donald is a fan. Is he?
That's a good question. He's kind of given some conflicting messaging on it. He's for energy independence, and nuclear, by pretty much any person you talk to, has to play a big role in energy and energy dependence. But by the same token, as far as I know, he's not super fond of nuclear in general. So we'll see what happens there. The trick with the US is that we're really more like the EU than anything else, in that every individual state has its own regulations and requirements and restrictions. So you go to a state like California, and they are hugely restrictive of the ability to use nuclear, which is ironic in my mind because they're one of the states that most needs help with their power grid. So why they're refusing to use a resource that could be very powerful for them, I don't understand, but that's California for you. But then you get other states that are much more, what's that?
Marketing.
Well, yeah. I mean, to your point, the marketing is unfortunate because you hear nuclear and you think big boom, and that's not what you want people to think when it comes to power. But, I don't know.
Yeah.
My company does a lot with power and with energy, the energy grid and all that kind of stuff. And so we're always looking at ways that we can improve the efficiency of the grid system. And, as you mentioned, it's either storage or it's more reliable, consistent energy source. And we frankly look at both, and I think they're both going to be necessary as we move forward. But we'll see what the regulatory outlook looks like over the next couple of years for nuclear here. It's interesting. It's very state by state.
Well, let's see if UK Gov is going to take the message from Matt Garman requesting more nuclear to power Amazon AI data centers in the UK. And on that note, we have reached the end of our time for season 4, episode 20 of Logicast. So if you are still listening, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, please tell your friends. We are available to download from wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to see Jen's wonderful ambassador shirt with her name on it, we're also on our YouTube channel where you can watch a full episode in video. So just remains for me to thank you, John, as always, for your insights, and thank you, Jen, for joining us once again on the podcast. Been great to have you back as our guest for, I think, a second time. Excuse me. So yeah, thank you very much for coming back and sharing your insights and your ongoing augmented credentials in the world of AWS. So yeah, great, and I'm really interested to hear more about this application of hyperfocus, and maybe we can talk about that off air.
Happy to.
So thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, see you again next time.